Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about 11.3, area of a rhombus and a kite. So actually for area of a rhombus and a kite, they're actually going to be the same formula. So when we're finding the area with diagonals d1 and d2, all we're going to do is take 1/2 times d1 times d2. So if we're looking at a rhombus or a kite and we're wanting to find the area, all we're going to do is we're going to multiply those diagonal lengths together and then divide it by 2. And before we go into some problems, a couple of reminders about properties of these rhombuses and kites. If you remember from earlier this semester, we talked about these. And one thing that we talked about is that the diagonals are actually perpendicular to one another. So they're all intersecting at 90-degree angles. So we're really going to have 4 right triangles in here. And then for a rhombus, so for this one, the diagonals actually bisect one another as well. So this would be congruent with that side, and this side, this length is congruent with this length. But then for a kite, so unlike this one, the only one that is congruent to one another is that this is congruent with that. So keep those in mind when we go into these problems. Okay, so this first one, we want to find the area of each rhombus or kite. So here I have a rhombus. So just a reminder, my area is going to be 1/2 d1 times d2. I'm just going to go ahead and label d1 and d2 in my picture. It doesn't really matter which one's which. Let's say 8 is my diagonal 1, this diagonal. And this diagonal is 6, so that's going to be d2. What I'm going to do is plug that into the formula. So now I have 1/2 d1, which is 8, times d2, which is 6. Well, 1/2 times 8 is 4. 4 times 6 gets me 24. So I have 24 meters squared. Okay, now let's look at this next one. So this one is a kite. So first I want to label my d1, d2. Let's say that this diagonal is d1. Well, I know that this length is 6, this length is 12, so that means the whole diagonal is 6 plus 12, which is 18. And then now for d2, it only gives us this length. But if you remember from before, in a kite, these two lengths are actually congruent to one another, and that's because these two triangles are congruent to one another. So this is also 5. So 5 plus 5 gets me 10. And so again, I know that the area is 1/2 d1 times d2. Well, d1 in this case is 18, and d2 is 10. So that means that my area is 1/2 times 18, which is 9, and then 9 times 10, which is 90. And then put my units squared. Okay, let's go over one more, which looks a little bit different. So here I have a rhombus. That means all my sides are equal. It gives me one diagonal. So let's say this one's d1. So I know d1 is equal to 16, because 8 plus 8 is 16. But it doesn't give me anything with my second diagonal. However, I do know that this side length is 10. So this is where we have to remember our properties. And one thing that we talked about earlier is that these diagonals are perpendicular to one another. So that means this is actually a right triangle. So I need to first use my Pythagorean theorem to find this side length. So I know a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Well, I have an a, 8 squared. I don't know my b, so let's label that as b. But then I do know my hypotenuse is 10 squared. And so 8 squared, that is 64. 100, or 10 squared is 100. So subtracting 64 from both sides, I get 36. And then taking the square root, I see that b is equal to 6. So that means that this side length 6, well, these two are equal to one another. I know are congruent, so that means this is 6. And then 6 plus 6, I get 12. And now that I have both diagonals, I can go ahead and plug that into this formula. So I have 1/2 times D1, which is 16, times D2, which is 12. Well, 1/2 of 16 is 8, and then 8 times 12, that is going to get me 96. Okay, that is it for today. Your homework is on big ideas.